Welcome to the Biblical X-Files, where we attempt to connect myths, legends, and conspiracies to a biblical worldview and unpack those seldom looked at stories in the Bible. All right, tonight, Logan, we're going to, I guess this is episode 7?
Yep, it is.
Episode 7, we're going to unpack what is called in literature and what is called in news articles a pygmy race, which happens to be just, we're going to get into it, but it's just people, skeletons of a hybrid that is no higher than 3 foot. There was one that's like they measured at 4 foot tall, and they just called him the leader. But these are hybrids. Tonight we've looked at giant hybrids. Now we're going to look at little hybrids, small hybrid species that have been found in various locations around the world. So I guess we'd call this the Pygmy Race, Moon-Eyed People episode, because tonight we're going to introduce the viewers to the Moon-Eyed People, because that's right in our backyard. So real quick, before we start, I want to give a big shout out to all the people who submitted questions. They submitted some phenomenal questions. That was episode 6, the question and answers, probably to date my favorite episode. I really had a good time engaging with audience questions. All of our feedback that I've received is positive on the Q&A. Have you got any negative feedback on it?
Nope, not really.
All right, and I want people to know this. This is our desire is to have this a viewer-driven show, so to speak. So we want the people who are viewing to keep sending questions, and we also want them to send us ideas for future episodes. And these ideas, if it has to do with anything in our opening tag, we look at conspiracies, myths, and legends. Now, if we can tie it to a biblical worldview, we sure try. But if we can't, we will still unpack conspiracies, myths, and legends and see if we can come up with enough evidence to convince a jury that it's actually a fact and not a conspiracy, so to speak, a myth or a legend. So if you have any ideas, somebody submitted one and asked about Mel's Hole.
What? I've never heard that term.
It is a hole out in Seattle that supposedly has no bottom to it. Supposedly someone has thrown a dog in it and it came back like Pet Sematary, came back alive. They ran fishing line down it and they've gone 15 miles with no end in sight. Supposedly the government has came in, filled it up, took it away, and Mr. Mel, who started talking about this in the 90s on a show called The Art Bell Show, has disappeared.
Interesting.
So is it a hoax? If it is, it's an elaborate one. Is it legit? I don't know, but I'm thinking about looking that up and trying to put one together maybe down the road, because that was one that was submitted. Hey, this is one you got to do if you guys drift away and just do conspiracies, myths, and legends. Will you please look at this one? So, if anybody has seen anything strange and they want to talk about it, this is a place we won't ridicule you. We'll listen to you with objectivity and see where that goes too. So, if you got a topic you want to talk about, if you've seen something that's strange and you want to talk about it, if you have questions, please submit them, and we will jump on it. And at the first of the year, we will rock and roll with it. And probably the last week of December, we will not have a show. We want to let them know. We don't know yet. It depends on the holidays. But if you don't see anything the last week of December, it's because it is Christmas and the New Year, and we'll be right back in 2024.
Yep.
All right, man. So what if I told you that a small race of hybrid humans averaging about 2 to 3 foot tall have been found and discovered in America, North America, Europe, Indonesia, South Africa? And what if I told you that there's similarities in these little hybrids that you just can't ignore every place that they're found? There is a connection. And what if I told you that some of these small hybrids lived with giant Nephilim? So you have giant hybrids and these little small hybrids coexisting together in an environment, doing whatever it is that they did. We don't know, but by all evidence, they were not warring against each other. And what if I told you this pygmy race, because that's what all the literature calls them, a pygmy race or a dwarf race. So if you hear me say pygmy, if you hear me say dwarf, I'm really talking about a small hybrid. We've been talking about giant hybrids. Now just change your whole thought process and think about little 2 foot, 3 foot tall, genetically modified hybrids. And what if I told you this little pygmy race would strike fear into the Indians in North America because, as they say, and we'll get into it in just a minute, they were fierce warriors with far superior weaponry, as in their arrows could go further. They were more lethal than anything that the Indians had. They were terrified of this little pygmy race. So I thought it'd be a good time to start with just an overview of kind of like where they're located in the world. And we'll start at some of the furthest distance and work our way back into the homeland. And then we'll finish out our episode tonight talking about this pygmy race, this small hybrid Nephilim that are local to us here in the United States. Here's a headline from National Geographic, October 4th, 2004. Hobbit-like human ancestor found in Asia. That's pretty weird, isn't it? Now, we have some slides comparing the skull of a human to a skull of one of the small hobbit-type creatures that were found. The first slide is just a reconstruction of what they look like. The second slide is actually what they call the pygmy skull. And then the third slide that you'll see is an x-ray of a pygmy skull that's different than the first one that you see the individual holding by hand. This one has no chin. So the only difference between these small hybrid beings would be some have a chin that's pronounced like a human, and some do not have a chin that is pronounced like a human. Scientists, let me just tell you some of the high points from this article. It says scientists have found skeletons of human species that grew no larger than 3 feet. This species of pygmies lived with pygmy elephants, giant lizards in a remote part of Indonesia. So they're shrinking elephants and making lizards large. So based on this, if you look at this article through the eyes of Nephilim and what Nephilim did pre-flood and what they did after the flood, you can see that these little guys are genetically modifying animals, making a big elephant down to the size of a chihuahua, and then taking a small little lizard about this big and making it the size of a giraffe. So that it's strange. These bones were very strange. It's in 2004, and then once again, where are they? We'll get into the conspiracy about where all this stuff goes when it's discovered. The original skeleton, they said, stood 1 meter, 3.3 inches, 3 foot 3 inches tall, weighed about 55 pounds, and was somewhere around, they estimate, looking at the bone, somewhere in its 30s to maybe at the very latest, maybe early 40s at the time that it died. There's no cause of death. They couldn't come up with a cause of death on why this species of small hybrids on this Indonesian island just up and died. Skeletons were found in sediment deposits on the island of Flores. They found it about 10 feet deep in some dirt in a cave that they were excavating, just going in there looking for some. They were on a mission to find something else. They discovered these little hybrid bones, and then the other mission became secondary. And as far as I know, they're still working that area. I can't find any more articles on it. Any questions on our little Indonesian friends?
No, let's keep moving through it.
All right, man. So in 1837, you can find some Norse writings from Vikings, and they call they say this: there's a pygmies of the far north, is what they call them. And if you read through this writing, it says that around 1100 A.D., when the Vikings were coming across the Atlantic Ocean, they discovered Iceland, Greenland, and they came into Nova Scotia. And by all evidence, they made it down into Delaware and as far as Virginia. And so technically, they're the ones that discovered America probably first, the first European that got here. I don't know. That's a big debate. But we do know that they wrote about this voyage of running into giant pygmies of the north in Greenland and in what is now known as North America. They didn't engage these little fellas. They just kind of left them alone. Everybody just kind of coexisted. They went about their business. There's no historical evidence of them engaging with them, trading. There's no evidence of them fighting. All that may have happened. There's some conjecture out there that it did, but I can't find any other article except one little brief statement, and so that's not enough to come in here and say that they engaged with them. But we know that they saw them. There's definitely more than one writing on these Vikings saw these little people, and they were stunned that they saw them because they've always heard about them in their folklore and in their legends about these powerful little people, and always stay away from them. So they did. And then there's a guy named Olaus Mangus. He writes in his book in 1555, he calls them the Pygmies of Greenland. And he claims that the original inhabitants of Greenland, long before, obviously the Vikings had to have fought them because they eradicated the race. But he writes that this is what he said. I'm going to just read the quote from it because I find it kind of neat. This is what Olaus Mangus writes: "The little dwarf fiercely attacks his bigger opponent and triumphs in his victory. For at every opportunity he assaults the taller man with no less courage than if he could boast of a giant. He always has," he's talking about the little guy, "always has the upper hand and prevails." In other words, if you see one of these little pygmies, don't fight them. This little Nephilim hybrid. So I guess we'll get into it in a minute. The Indians say that they fought fiercely. We'll get into that in just a second. And this guy in Greenland says they fought fiercely. So if you have two independent sources from, one was written in like the 1800s, 1900s, and one is written in 1555, and they both say that these little small hybrids are fierce fighters, and I'd say then they're pretty much fierce fighters. Pygmy skeletons, 2.5 to 3 foot tall, were discovered recently in South Africa, and that's all you can find on it. They were in a cave, went down spelunking. At the bottom, they saw some little mounds, started rooting through the dirt, found these skeletons, went up, told the national park in South Africa, made them leave so they could go do their investigation. Nothing else. So now that's just some stuff around the world. There's some stuff in the English folklore about King Arthur fighting them in England. These little everybody thought it was just folklore, that he was fighting a little dwarf hobbit race of people in the Highlands. But when you look at this, some people said it was fact, some people said it was fiction. I always thought it was mythological until I started studying this. I kind of put more weight in King Arthur probably did fight them, a little small race.
What were some of the things that, I know this is a gradual process, of course, of going from believing it to mostly just be mythological to going to it being actually somewhat credible. Yeah, for you, like what was it, a span of time, or was it a certain article or a certain set of pieces of information that really convinced you, or what do you think it was? I
would say you got all the above mentioned right there. Because what happened is when you read the story, you just have one story of it. I personally am not going to put a lot of credibility. I mean, I'm going to believe the person, but I can't like say, yeah, I've really 100%. I'm not, why would they lie to me, that kind of thing. But when you start looking at the similarities over time, and we're talking maybe 1,000 years a difference here, you have a common denominator. They fought fiercely. The one thing that you're going to find that is a common denominator in all the bones that have been found, in all of the folklore where there are no bones, but it's talking about, they're always about 3 foot tall. They always have big heads, and they always have big eyes. And you can add that they're fierce fighters to that. And you can add that they've been seen with giants, and they coexisted with giants. So when I sit back and look at that evidence in its totality, it brings me to the belief that these are Nephilim-esque. They are a hybrid of sorts. See, we always think in our mind, we get preconditioned to think Nephilim are always going to be giants. And then if we do that, we miss the big picture. We don't look at the evidence properly that's presented and laid in front of us. And so now that I look at the evidence, I just see Satan changing his modus operandi. I see him changing how he does things. And so he's gone from giants to these little 3 foot. But if they're fierce fighters, I guess you could say that if they're attacking men, then they have strength. So you would say that they have strength that would be stronger than what a little 2-3 foot person should have. They're fierce fighters. So I think it's over time. It is over time, and it is looking at the evidence of the similarities. These people don't know each other. They're happening in different parts of the world and in different eras.
Yeah, I think that's the most compelling part of it for me, is the fact that there are so many weird similarities in the stories, but from different places and different time periods. That's obviously, I think the time periods part isn't as strong because, of course, you know, if one community says one thing and then the next generation they still believe it, that could just be, you know, word of mouth tradition,
Passed down legend,
oral tradition of, you know, like a legend. But if it's completely different cultures with different ideas and ideals and stories as a culture, and they all kind of have some very weirdly similar terminology for the same thing, you can call it moon-eyed people, or, you know, hobbits, or
dwarfs
or pygmies, whatever.
pygmies.
But really, again, if there's these weird similarities between multiple cultures, that's kind of like, that in and of itself is interesting to me.
Those dots connect very well to say, hey, there's something here.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, there's something here. And so then once you realize that there's something there, then don't look for coincidences. Try to find what it means. And that's what we have tried to do over the last. Did I know about a moon-eyed person till we started doing this? Never heard of it. You know, just stumbled across it in my research and said, let me look at this. And then that led me down a road of looking into Nephilim. And really, this guy right here, again, we go back to Mr. Fritz Zimmerman. He mentions, this is the Book of Giants, but in his Book of Giants, he has maybe 2 pages dedicated to the pygmy race that was found in America because they're found in mounds. Remember, he's investigating mounds for giants. Mm-hmm. And in these mounds of giants, you find these little bones too, these little people. And you also find them in fields buried around mounds. And so he inserted them in there, and then I'm like, well, wait a minute. You got the Indians talking about this. Let's see how many other Indians talk about it. And there's a few other Indian tribes in North America that talk about little people. They don't call them moon-eyed people like the Cherokee, and it's the eastern band of Cherokees that really have this in their folklore. And then I said, well, this is probably just all like you said. This is just verbiage passed down from generation to generation, unless I can find something more. And then as you dig, you'll find hundreds of years difference, different continents, all the way from 2004 discoveries all the way back to 1555. So I mean, there's a large time frame. So I believe that there's evidence there that these things are real.
Well, and I think maybe it's a throwaway thought, I'm not sure, but the thought that they mentioned there being and tell me if you recall what time period and culture said that they found giant remains and these, let's say, miniature remains all in the same location. Who was that, and what time period was that?
We're going to get into it. It's these were found. They were found in America,
like the commingled giant and miniature. Okay.
Yeah, and they were found in They were found in the Dakotas, and they were found out in New Mexico area, but both in New Mexico, the United States, and then in Mexico. And we'll get into that in just a second because I have some information on that I want to share, that they were commingling for sure.
Okay. Well, and so again, maybe I don't know how valid this thought is, but the idea that they are commingling in this, let's call it fiction for a second. Let's just say somebody made it up completely and they said we saw giant remains and we saw these miniature, people, whatever you want to call them, hybrids, remains in the same spot. As a complete made-up story, that doesn't really hold a lot of weight, because why are such dramatically different species, because assuming, and they're not humans, right? I mean, if they're
hybrids.
Giant.
They're hybrids.
And, yeah, so they're known, even within the realm of it being a made-up fake story, I feel like that wouldn't really be a good plot line to create out of thin air, that they were, because that's just kind of unlikely, right? But when it comes from the Nephilim angle, and you look at it through that prism, they have a common goal and they have a common interest despite having dramatically different characteristics. And I just think logistically speaking, it wouldn't make sense outside of having a common culture, or I wouldn't even say Nephilim has culture, but technically you could call it that. But essentially what they have is a mission statement, and they have a common enemy, which is us and God's design. So that to me is the only really compelling reason I can think of just logically as to why there would be giants and like these opposite of giants in the same space at the same time without being at war. And obviously I feel like the giants would pretty quickly, make light of miniature hybrids. So again, I just feel like if you would make a story up like that, like let's say the giant narrative or the miniature hybrid narrative is fake, I feel like you wouldn't combine those two to make something up to be believable if you wanted it to be believable. Because again, why other than the Nephilim situation would they commingle? Right?
I don't think they would. I don't think that they would commingle unless it was Nephilim-esque in the beginning. And see, this is one that we can, I believe, tie back to Scripture, because we do know that Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, that Nephilim are here. They were before the flood, and they will be after the flood. Jesus says in Matthew 24, they're clearly going to come back, the way I interpret it. And also, we know that according to the Old Testament, when Joshua sent the spies in, remember we went over the Amorite and the Canaanite giants in a few episodes back, they were genetically modifying animals and food. Now we see evidence of that with these little guys too, genetically modifying animals based on the skeletons that were found. So they hang out together, and they determine how to, when I say they hang out together, giants and the little small hybrids hang out together and concoct ways to corrupt, contaminate, and counterfeit what God made. So that's how I tie them in and bring them into my belief system, is I believe that they're just on the spectrum of Nephilim.
Right. Yeah, that makes the most logical sense to me. I mean, obviously, it's a very challenging topic to digest, but it doesn't make sense outside of them having a common interest like that.
And when we talk about giants and we talk about these little guys that people call hobbits, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. It's kind of weird to sit and talk about it, and people say, that dude really believes in that? How can, what do you mean? Believe me, it wasn't something that I just came to one day. It's a long process of examining page after page after page of evidence and just deciphering it and looking at it and saying, this makes sense. And I could be wrong, but I hope I'm not. When I investigated crimes, I would go the extra mile to ensure that I had the right guy. I wasn't going to be, I could never sleep with I could never rest at night if I thought I put the wrong person behind bars, because freedom is everything. And so I take these investigations with the same seriousness as looking at it to make sure if I present it, I wholeheartedly believe it to be fact. I'm not sitting here 90% on the fence with you. I believe this to be fact based on the evidence. Now, somebody could present other evidence that would change that, and I'm nimble enough to say, okay, based on what I had before, I believe this. Now I change my mind and I believe this. Now back to these little pygmy dudes. Idaho, June 5th, 1902, there's a headline that says, Ancient Pygmy Race Discovered. The article doesn't give the number of skeletons, but it does provide a description. And guess what the description is? Let me see if you're listening. What do you think the description is?
Small, about 2 to 3 foot tall.
Bingo.
Yep.
Very large eye sockets.
Yep.
And this one says weirdly shaped skull. And so some of these, we have the x-ray, some of them have no chin, and some of them start to form up an elongated skull on the back. Okay, and I'm going to show an elongated skull in one of our slides in a minute. That is not from a pygmy. It is showing you what the elongated skull looks like when they mention one, because in the writings they talk about these elongated skulls, some of them on these little hybrids, kind of a weird looking as it goes off to a point. But there was no, they haven't been able to get a picture of them. That's just going on the reports that people wrote down before they could get the pictures. So in Silver City, New Mexico, and Serona, Mexico, if you look on a map, you'll see that it's kind of down there in the bottom part of New Mexico. And then the state, so to speak, of Mexico that butts up to New Mexico in the United States is at the time is called Sonora, or Sonora. Sonora is what it is. It's Sonora, so Sonora, Mexico. In both places, they found what they call cliff-dwelling pygmy race. And there are some, if you go back to the original Star Wars, from like the 70s before you were born. And there was these little things called Jawas, and they had this weird looking little town. You probably seen the originals, because
a long time ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
those little Jawas and that weird little town that they lived in looks eerily similar to what the photos of this place looks like, where they found these dwellings with these little doors about 3 foot tall, 4 foot tall, little living rooms, little dwellings, and then right next to it there's like a big giant door, and then there's a big giant dwelling, and then right next to it's another small. So obviously they found both sets of bones there. They found giant bones, and they found small hybrid bones in this area of the Southwest.
And what seemed to be co-dwelling spaces as well with the giants.
Yes,
That's so strange.
Yes, small doors, small ceilings, big doors, big ceilings. It appears that these giant hybrids and these small pygmy hybrids lived harmoniously together. In fact, like the Hopi and a bunch of other Indian tribes that inhabited that area and over into Mexico have their wars with giants and their wars with little people. I can't find anything that says that the giants and the little people were fighting side by side, but I think it's safe to say that if they're living together, one of them probably looked at the other one and said, "I got this. Just stay here, eat that. I go take care of them." Something I don't know. Because it doesn't mention it, so I don't want to take liberties and make up a story. But if you want to ask me, I would say that they did fight side by side, but I can't. That's just an opinion. I don't have any writing to back that up. But common sense would say that if they're hanging out together, then they're allies.
Yeah.
Because one of the articles mentioned them and it uses the word allies. So they must be allies. So then they must be allies. Now, South Dakota, this is pretty cool. South Dakota railroad workers, this is from a railroad record from the South Dakota Railroad. And this is in the late 1800s. I think it's the date escapes me, maybe 1893, but the late 1800s. Railroad graders were coming through, and they were grading out for a new railroad line to go up into South Dakota. And as they were digging, bringing their earth-moving equipment across, they discovered a grave of skeletons for small pygmy hybrids. When they dug them all up, they laid them out, and they counted, according to the railroad records, about 50. Guess what they also unearthed in there? They unearthed some giants. Several of full skeletons of giants, and then several partial bones of giants. So they get on their little thing and go whatever that, telegraph back to the east and say, "Hey, look, man, we found this weird stuff. We got some photographs of them, and what do we do?" And they said, "Call the University of South Dakota." I think that was called, So back then it was called the University of South Dakota. Call them and tell them what you have. They did. Their anthropologist came up, quickly relieved them of their bones. Guess what organization from Washington, D.C. got involved? And then only evidence you have of this with pygmy bone hybrids and giant hybrids is the original communique back east to the headquarters and the photographs that were taken on site. After that, bam, nothing. It's gone. And so we're going to get into the great cover-up, because systematic cover-up, as you investigate this and you look, you will see that there is a systematic cover-up going on. South Dakota, 1922. No, and I wasn't born then. A guy named Captain Lewis, military dude, was out there and going through the area, and he asked a local Indian guide to show him Big Indian Mound. There's a Big Indian Mound in South Dakota that is 900 feet long, 200 feet wide, 75 feet tall, with a flat top. So we know that that's a zuggurat. So it's a zuggurat right there. So flat top. And he was, "Hey man, you really do have these," because he's heard about them. He hasn't really seen one yet. So he asked the guide to talk about it, and he's expecting to hear giant stories and all that stuff. And he goes, "Well," the Indian guide says, "Well, they are little people that live up there. They're only 2 or 3 foot tall." And he said live up there. He didn't say lived up there. Okay, so this guide said live, which got the captain's hackles up a little bit because he only had 10 men with them. And he goes, okay, they live up there? And the guy's like, yeah, they live up there. So then he writes and he says that the Indian guide told him that they were 2 to 3 foot tall, had these big, huge eyes and these bulging, weird skulls. And the way he described it is like an elongated skull off the back of the head. And he said that they call them, let me get this right. He said they call this place, that Indian mound, they call the Mountain of Little People, or they call it the Mountain of Little Spirits. That's what they called it. And so then the captain kind of walked up through there and was looking and decided the Indian guide went up to the top of the ziggurat and said, hey, and then this is where they come and go from. And so the captain went up and eyewitnessed these small round holes. He said that it would be hard for the average size human to get down into, but you could, but it would just be tight. And he said that must be the entry and exit point for these little guys. And the Indian guy said, are you going to go down in there? And he said, no, we're leaving.
Smart guy.
So smart guy. So he left, but Captain Lewis went on to say, though, that it took him by surprise because he was expecting. Now, this Indian guy did not tell him about giants. So to say if giants coexisted in this part of South Dakota, I don't know. But they were found in the Dakotas together, so I would say that they do. If anybody wants to go up there and dig up that hole and see. But this is the first one that I heard, because I believe, you got to be big on words. And so, and obviously Captain Lewis was big on words, because lived there, like past tense is one thing, live there present tense is a whole nother world. So I think I'd side with him. I think I would. How about you?
Yeah, I'd get out of there immediately.
All right, so now let's get close to home, Tennessee. Great state of Tennessee. As Leonard Skinner says, T is for Texas and T is for Tennessee. And I like both places, but I'm partial to Tennessee. So Tennessee, I think this is the most compelling evidence that you can find for these little pygmy race, these small hybrids. And we have some photographs. The photograph number 4 is Tennessee. It's showing you on Google Maps where White County is, because that's the first large-scale grave site of small hybrids discovered in the United States. And then the other one, the second, I guess you could say slide number 5 is the article from the Woodbury Press from that region that talks about this first discovery in White County. So I talk about these articles. We finally got a good photograph that they can actually see. The 6th one that we're going to look at as I go down the line will be the Moonite people. What you see in that photograph will be a stone sculpture of a rendition, so to speak, of what the ancient Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians said that these small little pygmy, small little dwarf race, small little hobbit race, we call them hybrids, look like. And of course, we'll get into the description. And I believe that we may have, we have one more picture, and one of them is the elongated skull from Peru that was actually from a giant Nephilim, but it shows how that elongation looks. And then the other one is a small pygmy hybrid race that was found in Europe that is in the museum in France. That little guy you saw with the little goofy looking thing that looked freaky, that he's on display. So if you ever go to Paris, jump on in there into the museum and you can look at them. All right, so these Tennessee hybrids in 1823, Sparta, White County, Tennessee. This is an article out of the Natural and Aboriginal History of Tennessee, dated 1823. And it says, a farmer discovered a field of pygmy people, hundreds of skeletons ranging 2 to 3 feet tall with large skulls and large eye holes, eye sockets, I guess, were buried with strange artifacts, and they were buried standing up, which is different.
That's funky. That's not
funky.
a very human practice.
No, and they were all standing up. And you're going to find that that's kind of common unless you go through with some kind of earth-moving equipment and disturb it. You'll find that most of these in Tennessee and over on the western slope of the Smoky Mountains facing Tennessee are all standing up. It's very weird. I can't find any writings on that or if any viewer has an idea on why they're buried standing up, I'd be all ears on listening to that.
Well, is there any documentation of these hybrids being buried vertically anywhere other than Tennessee, or is that the only place that you know of that's been documented?
It's the only place that I know of has been documented. Nobody else has gone into great detail.
If they found that out somewhere else,
that would be neat.
That would be really compelling because that's not a very. I feel like if people are gonna make up a burial site, they think like people do and they bury it the way we would, and just assume that if we're gonna make this up and it's fake, we're gonna bury it the most efficient way, which is horizontally. But if two different parts in the world were to do that vertically, that would be really funky.
Be crazy.
Really weird. Yeah.
I agree with you on that. So basically that journal says that they were 2-3 foot tall, standing up, big-eyed, big-headed, and there they are. That's just across the board. You see how that is just across the board, that same description of the giant bones. You have to put some credibility into that. The Anthropology, I get it out there. The Anthropology Journal of 1876. Now, this is an important date. I'm going to bring you back to something else on 1876 because this happens to be the centennial of the United States. 1776, 1876. This journal says that a very large pygmy graveyard was discovered, over 100,000 full skeletons, and thousands more were discovered. Partials. This article states that the skeletons were like the ones discovered over in White County, because this is just like 2 counties over in Tennessee. And it just basically, the article says that they're just like the ones discovered in White County. 2 to 3 foot tall, big eye sockets, big skulls. So I guess it's safe to assume that they were buried standing up, and they were buried with articles and trinkets and relics with them, or this article would have said they were buried. It's not the same. So it was just saying just go reference this article for all the similarities. We're just saying what was found right here. And they were getting briefer in their description. And in a minute, you're going to find out why they were briefer in their description, because there's a Washington organization that comes in and buries the subject. So Queens County Sentinel, dateline August 3rd, 1893, headline, Dwarf Americans. Now, this is the western slope facing, west from the slope. Like if you were traveling down I-40 and you're heading in from North Carolina, like you're heading toward Gatlinburg into Tennessee, right at that state line in those mountains, that's what this is referencing. 2 to 3 foot tall, big head, big-eyed race found. The only exception in this article that I find with the other articles that we looked at for coming out of Tennessee, this is the first article that connects these small, hybrid, humanoid, dwarf-like, pygmy people to the Moon-Eyed people of the eastern band of Cherokee Indians, because the article says these are the people that the Cherokee Indian fought for decades. So they're going on and saying that they're believing the Cherokee Indian when they say that they fought that. So I don't know what evidence was presented for this to go into the newspaper, but some evidence obviously was presented, because he would have referenced folklore fighting. He must have saw some evidence of a fight. That's the only thing I can think of. Now it's important to note that they're the same thing: big eyes, elongated, big skulls, 2 to 3 foot tall. Now the Cherokee Indian legend is this: that they were very pale in complexion and had big, huge blue eyes. They were very pale because they didn't come out in the sunshine. They lived in caves. They were cave dwellers, just like out west. They were cliff dwellers. Those were basically caves they were living in with the doors that they had chiseled into the side of a cliff. So their common denominator there is they're cliff dwellers. They're cave dwellers, okay? It says that they only come out at night, and even when it's a full moon, if they come out, it's almost as if they're blinded. They can't see. So even a full moon will affect their sight at this point within the Cherokee legend. Now, the Creek Indians of northwest Georgia were allies of the Cherokee. And the Cherokee legend says that the Creek Indians one night at a full moon ascended up the side of what we know as Fort Mountain. And at the top of Fort Mountain, it's described, it looks totally different today than it did as the description of the legends go. You know, trees aren't really there. And at the top of the mountain is this rock fort structure that the Moon-Eyed people lived behind. We would call it a Stonehenge. If we were looking at it in modern terms, we would say that these Moon-Eyed people live within a Stonehenge according to the Creek and Cherokee Indian legends. Now, where do we learn about who hangs out, who builds, and who utilizes Stonehenges? Nephilim. All right, so here we have another clear, if you look at it objectively, another clear piece of evidence. If it is truly a Stonehenge, we've been there, and we believe that it is, and we also believe that there's megalithic rock structures there. We've seen with our own two eyes.
Not even the ones that were part of the trail. We just drifted off the trail, and we found some really, really
intriguing rock structures that we'll bring out in an episode down the road that, I mean, they are what they are. You can look at them and make your own conclusion. So if this is a henge, which it is, and if there's megalithic rock structures, which we believe they are, that is all consistent with Nephilim throughout the ages. And so here we see evidence of these Moon-Eyed people utilizing the same thing Nephilim utilizes because they're small hybrid Nephilim. The Creek Indian attacked on a full moon. They were able to breach the wall. They were able to kill so many. I guess, according to legend, a treaty was brought. The Moon-Eyed people said, if you give us time, like tomorrow night, we can't leave in the day. Tomorrow night, we're out of here. Next day, they're gone. And so we've never, and not only that, at that point in time, they have really left the legend of the Cherokee. Now, that happened long before the dates that we're talking about. So did these Moon-Eyed people leave and go into the hills of Tennessee? Did they leave and go to the hills of out west and become cliff dwellers? I don't know. Where was the giant to help them? Because the giant, there is a stone giant within the Cherokee folklore that they trace back to Nephilim. So coexisting in North Carolina with the Moon-Eyed people. There's no evidence of the Cherokee folklore of them fighting each other. So maybe they coexisted. I don't know where there are giants to help them fight the Indians, but they were ran out of Fort Mountain. So that's the legend of the Moon-Eyed people. Now, I'm going to give you a quote from the Tennessee Archaeology, Volume 7, Fall Report, Number 1 in 2013. This paper pretty much summarizes all what I told you about the Tennessee small hybrids, any giants that were found in Tennessee. But this is, I want to give you something off of page 50 that kind of, I want to then apply it to what all we've talked about tonight. Page 50 from this article says, with the United States Centennial celebration approaching in 1876, the widespread stories of Tennessee pygmies apparently began to concern the leadership of the Smithsonian Institution. And then I put this in there because this isn't in the article. This is where the cover-up to dismiss and discredit the pygmy people. In fact, this article here that I'm quoting from tries to go through and give you all the talking points from the Smithsonian to discredit the bones that were found. From anthropologists, from scientists, from medical doctors from the era when they were discovered all said these are adult teeth. Because the one thing, because what the Smithsonian says, oh, it's a mass grave of small children. They used to do that a lot back. The 100,000 small children die at one time. Come on, man. And then the teeth are a dead giveaway. This is what you have to understand. Every molar that they can find on the skull with these small hybrids are definitely adult molars and adult teeth. Sometimes would be in the range of 30 to 40 years of age. So they're not baby teeth.
So old but small doesn't mean kids.
No, that's not the teeth. Because, I mean, at first I was thinking maybe it could be. Maybe this is something. Maybe the Smithsonian's, a broken clock is right twice a day. Right?
Yep.
So maybe the Smithsonian's not trying to cover something up on this particular. And maybe they are. Maybe they do have a compelling case. So let's look at it. But then when you look at the teeth, and the teeth are of an adult on the skeletons, then my pendulum swings back over to the great cover-up of the Smithsonian. Why do they try to cover up giant bones? Why are they trying to cover up these small hybrid pygmy creatures? They won't tell you. If you call and can get through, I bet you $5 they'll be very snippy with you. Maybe we ought to just do that one day. Just call and call and call one day. Maybe one day when I have a day off, I'm just going to call all day till I get somebody and they just get ticked off at me. So let me ask you this. Hobbits, fairies, little people of folklore. I think they trace their origins back to Nephilim, just like we traced Nephilim back to the origins of mythology, Beowulf, the Titans, all that goes to the giants. And I believe that all these little hobbits and these little trolls and these little, what are they called? The guys that wear the funky, they're not elves. Gnomes. All that probably trace their origins back to this small little hybrid of Nephilim that people are calling a pygmy race, a dwarf race. So, once again, I mean, I love when Solomon says there's nothing new under the sun. That dude, he's supposed to, when God said, hey, what do you want? And he goes, I want knowledge and wisdom. Obviously, he got a double dose of it because he's got Nephilim knowledge, basically, the way I look at it, because that man's right on a bunch of stuff. And so there's nothing new under the sun. And I believe that that's where all these legends, I think you can tie them right back to a biblical narrative. It's just a different form of Nephilim. So what I'm saying is this. I think these hybrids of different type, Satan, trial and error, working to try to find something that's going to be able to work down the road for him. He's moved on from giants, and he started with these little dwarf-like hybrid beings. I believe that something between the two of those are what's going to come back. When we're looking for evidence of Nephilim to come back in the last of the last days, I think we probably need to look for something. Maybe not 6 foot, maybe in the 5 foot range, maybe 4 to 5 foot range, because it looks like he's starting to bridge a gap in between. Something that won't be so fierce looking, sounding. It'll be more pleasant to the eye, more pleasant to the ears. Remember, Flavius Josephus, the historian from the 1st century, wrote about the screeching and the irritability that these giants would cause the human ear. So all that stuff Satan's been working on. So the next time that he brings them out and marches them out, so to speak, in a parade, they're going to be more appealing to the eye. They're going to be more appealing to the ear, and they're going to be more. They're going to be able to assimilate into our culture a little bit easier.
And to put on the tinfoil hat, I wanted you to mention on that point the possibility of this interdimensional being Nephilim actively training in the real world in certain areas on human mannerisms, human communication, human behavior. And like we mentioned briefly in the Q&A, someone asked about, Nephilim now, and you pointed out that there are some people who think that you can see these bizarro figures, these
Dr.
characters.
Jacob's book's right there, filled with firsthand accounts.
Yeah,
See that.
And so that's called Walking Among Us, and that is apparently talking about what the secular world knows as alien abductions.
We call them, if you read that book, substitute Nephilim every time you see alien, and it'll make a lot of sense.
Yep, absolutely. So to me, I think the whole iteration process that Satan's going through with the giants on one end of the spectrum to the miniature, more hobbit-like species, to me, that makes sense, and your whole idea on him constantly evolving his strategy makes sense with the alien abduction narrative.
Yeah.
As far as getting people on board to some degree, obviously against their will, to experiment and to toy around with his design.
Yeah, see what you look at when you listen to ufologists, these people who are experts in the field of UFOs and aliens and close encounters of the first, second, third, fourth kind. Some of these guys are crackpots. I mean, just straight up, they're crazy. And some of them are genius. And Dr. Jacobs falls into the genius category of it because he was very objective. Some people have an agenda, and as soon as you start looking at their evidence, you see that they're pushing an agenda.
Sure.
He is very objective. So the ones that I listen to, if they're a ufologist, I listen to people who are objective in their evidence, and they have some type of integrity in their investigative approach. And they have 2 sources, 3 sources, 4 sources. And these sources have never met each other, or they haven't known each other until they bring them together to talk. But they vetted their story over the years and then bring them in and talk. Those are the people you want to pay attention to. Now, they're going to call them aliens because they're ufologists. They're not. Most of them aren't born-again Christians. I haven't found I guess there are a few ufologists out there that are born-again believers and look at this from a extra-dimensional being, but you can't really be a ufologist if you're always going to talk extra-dimensional. It has to be somebody from out there and planet weird, whatever, I say Zozo or woo-woo, I don't know, but that's what, if to be a ufologist, they got to be from somewhere billions of years, light years away out there in the galaxy, where and then they may talk about extra-dimensional beings as well and tie the two together, but they won't. I'm just solo extra-dimensional.
Yeah, they would say like intergalactic.
Right,
like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I believe that these moon-eyed people, these little hobbit creatures, these small hybrids, I really truly believe that they're the first iteration of what these ufologists call the gray alien. Okay? And I believe that they are, that some of them are actually small hybrids that take on that look of an alien. And then I believe that some are actually demons who, Satan is a counterfeiter. And the Apostle Paul calls this flesh that we have, he calls it a temporary tent. And he goes on to say to be absent from the Father, to be out of that temporary tent is to be permanently with God, and it's an immediate thing for the believer when they die. That's awesome, right? So Satan, since he is a counterfeiter, I believe that he is counterfeiting this tent that God gave us. Remember, Satan hates us because we're created in God's image, and we're created. Here's a simple thing for it. The reason why Satan hates us so much, those who believe. He doesn't hate humans. He just hates believing Christian humans. The ones that he loves. It's because we believe in Christ, and we believe in God, and we believe in Holy Spirit based on faith alone. Satan saw God. Satan saw Jesus. Satan saw the Holy Spirit. He lived with them for how long? I don't know, but it was a long time before the coup was launched, right? But yet he chose to go a different path. Seeing, feeling, touching, knowing. And we choose to follow God based on faith alone. Faith is something he doesn't have. He doesn't possess. That's why he hates it so much in a short story. And so he tries to counterfeit everything that we are. And I believe that these aliens that people see nowadays, that ufologists talk about, these gray aliens with the big eyes and the elongated skull, well, we see the first iteration of that with Nephilim hobbits, so to speak, right? I believe that some of these are just like the hybrid. He's creating big hybrids, creating little hybrids, and he'll make them look like an alien. But I believe some of them are truly demons that are in an alien-looking suit. Somehow he has designed a temporary tent like God's given us, because he's anti-God. 666 is really just the anti-Trinity. It's Satan, it's the Antichrist, and it's the false prophet. Once again, he's trying to counterfeit the Trinity. And so everything he does, he counterfeits. And I believe that when Jacob's book, when he says, when some of his people who state that they were abducted see these gray alien suits stacked up and they can't figure out why, and this is from more than one source over a 20-year period, and never met each other, and this stuff wasn't out there yet, right? What does that mean? How do I square that with Nephilim? And so then as I thought it through, I thought, well, that's probably a demon is actually going to, Satan is such a counterfeiter, and he is such a contaminator. He has finally counterfeited what his mind is, the tent that we have, because that's something he hasn't been able to counterfeit. Obviously, that's going to come into play, I think, in the end times with a lot of these hybrids. But so that's just off subject, but I believe that does tie into these little people that we're looking at. Gray, they call them the grays. Ufologists call them the grays. We call them little hybrid Nephilim. What it is. When we come back, and we're going to come back after the first of the year, we're going to go ahead and take our Christmas break. This will be the last episode before our Christmas break. When we come back, we will look a little deeper into how the Nephilim, small pygmy race, fits into the end times, and then we'll close that file. But what I'm going to ask people to do in the meantime, because we're going to have several weeks before we come back, the first week of January, send us some topics that you want to look at. Send us some questions, because I bring topics to you guys that I think you may be interested in. But if you shoot me something that you're definitely interested in, you may be giving me ideas of stuff that I have not looked at, like Mel's Hole in detail. You send us some stuff like that, we'll come out of the gate at the first of the year talking about your stuff. And then when y'all run out of ideas, we'll just go back to the stuff we have in the pipeline. But we want to ensure that's why this is called Jai and I, because that means me and you talking, and it means us and them, the viewer. And that's the whole reason behind it, if anybody was ever wondering why we call it that. So this is your way to be I in the jaiandI.com and send us stuff for us to investigate and do a full episode on, and send us questions to answer, because we really want to hear what you have to say. But until then, we here at jaiandI.com, the Biblical X-Files, want to say Merry Christmas, and we hope that you have a blessed and wonderful new year, and I hope that there's no Nephilim wrapped up under your Christmas tree. See you in 2024.
God bless you guys. Thanks for watching.